In the Haftarah this morning, we read the following from the prophet Zechariah. God speaks to the prophet and asks, "What do you see?" And I answered, "I see a lampstand all of gold with a bowl above it. Lamps on it are 7 in number, and the lamps above it have 7 pipes. And by it are 2 olive trees, one on the right of the bowl and one on its left." That image of the menorah, flanked by the olive trees, which will feed the flames lit in it, connect the Haftarah directly to this morning's Torah portion, which began, not in the section that we read, but the entire Parashat with the menorah that would travel with the Israelites and then take up residence in the Mishkan and then in the temple in Jerusalem. And it became a symbol of God's presence amidst the people. And one can see the connection between the menorah of the wilderness wandering to the menorah of the temple in Jerusalem. And for the prophet Zechariah, it is the menorah that will be built one day in the future in the new reestablished Beit HaMikdash, the newly reestablished temple in Jerusalem, symbolizing the return of the Jewish people to its land. And Zechariah gets to see the completion of the temple and the restoration of the symbolic presence of God by the kindling of the lights. I want to fast forward in history a little bit. How many of you have either had an opportunity to see in person or see pictures of the Arch of Titus in Rome? One. Okay, a handful of people have seen it either in person or pictures of it, right? And its relevance here is that it depicts Titus's triumphant return from Jerusalem and the conquest and the pillaging of the temple. And one of the primary artifacts that is depicted in the spoils of war is, in fact, what? The menorah. And it is likely that the artist who used the menorah as a template as he's carving this may have been one of the last people to actually ever see the menorah, because it is lost somewhere in the mists of history. Now I want to fast forward. In creating the symbol for the state of Israel, Gabriel and Maxim Shamir designed the seal of the state of Israel based on the image embedded in the Arch of Titus. If you look at the two, you can see it's the same. But what have they done? Something magnificent. They have taken the menorah, which for Titus is a symbol of the defeat of the Jewish people, symbol of loss of a loss of independence, a loss of statehood, a loss of all the things that matter most to a people. And they turned it on its head. They reclaimed it from history and turned it from a symbol of failure and loss to a symbol of renewal, exactly as the prophet Zechariah is doing in our Haftarah today. And they also dipped into the Haftarah because just as the prophet Zechariah sees the olive trees, one on the right and one on the left of the menorah, symbol of the olives that will be crushed to make the oil that will be lit in the menorah, on each side of the menorah, on the seal of Israel, olive branch. And there's some suggestion, there's to shock you. There's a debate amongst Jewish people. There are some who suggest that the olive branches represent the olive branches, the trees that the prophet Zechariah describes. Others suggest it is meant as the symbol of peace. You can't go wrong with either one. But and God willing, these should be the things that we argue about. But it strikes me that there's an even more powerful message here. And it's one that ties us today. The continuation of the menorah is replicated in synagogues everywhere through the implanting of a ner tamid. The ner tamid is supposed to function as the menorah did, as a reminder of the symbol of God's presence. But I think we've lost something important along the way. I asked you to translate ner tamid. What would you say? Eternal light. Yeah, that was a gimme question. It wasn't, right? And the word eternal implies forever, right? And therefore, it's a reference to the presence of God. Now, what's the reality of the ner tamid? The ner tamid kind of just sits there. And every once in a blue moon, we replace the light bulb, right? Because that gets burnt out. I don't know what the schedule is here. In my previous congregation, we changed it just before Rosh Hashanah and just before Pesach, whether it needed it or not, so that we never had a situation where it wasn't lit. So we had a preemptive changing of the bulb. But in reality, that's not what the word tamid means. When the Torah describes the menorah, it uses the word tamid, but it doesn't mean eternal. It means perpetual. Because in order for the menorah to be lit on an ongoing and constant basis, part of the job of the Kohanim was to every morning go in and trim the wicks and put oil in the bowls at the top of the menorah, and make sure that they stayed lit. And every evening, the Kohanim would go into the sacred space where the menorah was, and they would refill the bowls of oil and trim the wicks in order to ensure that the menorah stayed lit and the symbol of God being present was ongoing. But it required perpetual care and attendance. It was not, as we do now, it's on, it's always on. Most of us never even think about even something as mundane as, well, we got to change the bulb once in a while. It has become a great symbol of God's presence, but it has taken us out of operative part. And I think that's part of why the prophet has those two olive trees in his image of the menorah. Because the menorah required oil. It required trees to be planted and tended. It required olives to be harvested and crushed and oil to be prepared. And we know from the story of Hanukkah that creating the kind of pure burning oil was not a quick task and required a certain amount of skill. But it demanded human participation. I think that's part of why Gabriel and Maxime chose had the branches of olive as a reminder that, yes, the state of Israel may, if we are fortunate, have divine presence and divine protection. But the only way to ensure it is by the ongoing effort of the Jewish people, regardless of where we are. So, tend to the needs of our Jewish brethren. We tend to the needs of the state of Israel in a way that is tamid, a way that is perpetual. It is part of the daily, weekly, monthly routine that we engage in. That way, we keep literally and figuratively the light of God's presence on in our midst and our state. Amen. Averim, let me invite you to return to your Sidurim.